The hospital cut my research budget by $150,000. Said we were in austerity times. The next day, I saw the invoice for the executive golf retreat at Pebble Beach. Same amount, $150,000. They chose golf over patience. So I took my patent and walked away. And when they realized what they'd lost, it was already too late. But before I tell you about the moment the CEO called me begging, about the $500 million deal that collapsed, about watching the administrator who cut my budget get fired in disgrace, let me take you back to the beginning. To the day I created something that would change neurology forever. My name is Dr. Silas Vance. I'm 42 years old, chief of bioengineering at St. Jude Medical Center in San Francisco. And this is the story of how corporate greed cost a hospital everything. I've worked at St. Jude for 11 years. Started as a researcher, worked my way up to department head. My specialty is neurorehabilitation technology, specifically helping stroke victims regain lost function. Every year in the U.S., 700,000 people suffer strokes. About 2/3 survive, but with permanent disabilities. Lost mobility, paralysis, lives destroyed in an instant. I spent 8 years developing what I call the Neuralink, a combination of neural implant and external stimulator that essentially reroutes damaged neural pathways. It allows stroke patients to regain movement in paralyzed limbs. In my preliminary trials with 18 patients, we saw mobility improvement in 16 of them. 89% success rate. People who hadn't moved their arms in 3 years could hold a cup, could hug their grandchildren, could live again. This wasn't just medical innovation. This was life restoration. The patent application alone was worth potentially $500 million. Licensing deals, manufacturing contracts, global distribution. But I needed one more thing: final clinical trials. FDA approval pathway. The last push before commercialization. Cost estimate, $150,000. 6 months of work. After 8 years and millions already invested, this was the final step. I prepared my budget request meticulously. Detailed breakdown. Timeline. Expected outcomes. Return on investment projections. I scheduled a meeting with hospital administration. I was confident. This was a no-brainer. That's when I met Dr. Preston Sterling. Preston Sterling had been hired as Chief Administrative Officer 6 months earlier. 54 years old, MBA from Wharton, background in hospital optimization. He wore $1,000 suits, drove a Tesla, had never touched a patient in his life. He saw hospitals as real estate portfolios, not healing centers. Our meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Monday. I arrived with my presentation printed and bound. Sterling's office was ridiculous. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, view of the Bay Bridge. More executive suite than medical administration. Dr. Vance, he greeted me with outstanding. I have 15 minutes. Make it quick. I went through my presentation. The Neuralink technology, success rates, market potential, the final budget request of $150. Sterling barely looked at the materials. $150,000, he repeated. That's significant. It's the final phase. After this, we'll have FDA approval pathway, and Dr. Vance, I'm sure your research is interesting. But we're in austerity times. Margins are tight. We need to be strategic about spending. Strategic? This technology could generate $500 million, might, potentially. He waved his hand dismissively. I deal in certainties, balance sheets, real numbers. The real number is 16 patients who can move again, who have their lives back. Sterling smiled. Not warmly. That's very touching. But sentiment doesn't pay the bills. Request denied. Denied? Preston, this is 8 years of work, and it can wait another year. Reapply next fiscal cycle. We'll reconsider. Another year? The patient trials are scheduled. The equipment is ready. We just need, Dr. Vance, the decision is final. In fact, he pulled up something on his computer. I'm cutting your department budget by 20% effective immediately. My stomach dropped. 20%? That'll shut down half my lab. Then prioritize. Focus on what's profitable now, not what might be profitable someday. I left his office in shock. Numb. 8 years. 16 lives changed. millions in potential revenue. Denied because of austerity. But the next day, everything became clear. I was in the break room printing patient charts when I noticed something coming out of the share printer. It was an invoice, addressed to hospital administration, from Pebble Beach Golf Resort. Executive Leadership Retreat. 3 days. 20 participants. My eyes went down to the total. $147,850. $147,850. For golf. I stood there staring at that paper for a full minute. They cut my research budget for austerity. They denied funding that would help paralyzed patients walk again, so they could play golf at one of the most expensive resorts in California. I took a photo of the invoice with my phone, and I went home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that number. $147,850. Almost exactly what I'd requested. They chose golf over patience. But rage wasn't going to help. I needed strategy. I pulled out my employment contract. All 87 pages. I'd signed it 11 years ago and barely looked at it since. I started reading. Every clause, every subsection, every piece of legal language. And on page 63, I found it. Section 4.2. Intellectual property rights and maintenance clause. The institution shall retain rights to patents and inventions developed by employee during employment, provided that the institution maintains minimum annual research support funding of no less than 75% of the employee's approved departmental budget. Failure to maintain said minimum funding level shall result in automatic reversion of all patent rights to the employee, effective 30 days after funding reduction. I read it 3 times. This clause existed to protect researchers from having their work stolen if hospitals abandoned their programs. And Sterling had just cut my budget by 20%, below the 75% threshold, which meant the hospital had accidentally forfeited all rights to the Neuralink. My hands were shaking. I called my lawyer the next morning. Jessica Park. Smart, aggressive, specialized in medical IP law. Jessica, I need you to review something. I sent her my contract. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Silas, do you understand what this means? Tell me I'm reading it right. You're reading it right. The budget cut violated the maintenance clause. As of 30 days from that cut, all your patents revert to you personally. So the Neuralink is yours. Completely. The hospital has no claim. I sat down. What do I do? Nothing. Don't tell them. Let the 30 days pass. Then you own everything. And then you have options. I had options. Over the next 4 weeks, I worked normally. Showed up, did my job, smiled at Sterling in the hallway. He had no idea what he'd done. On day 28, I reached out to Apex Biotech, a private medical technology company based in Menlo Park. Huge funding, cutting-edge facilities, known for aggressive talent acquisition. I sent their CEO, Dr. Miranda Chun, a simple email. I have a neurostimulation technology that restores mobility in stroke patients. 89% success rate, and I own it completely. Interested? She responded in 2 hours. Very. When can we meet? The meeting was the next day. I brought my prototype, my patient data, my patent applications, and my employment contract showing the maintenance clause and budget cut documentation. Miranda reviewed everything for an hour. Then she looked up at me. This is extraordinary. The technology is revolutionary. The data is solid. And you own it free and clear. Completely. What do you want? State-of-the-art lab. Full research team. Budget to complete FDA trials. Done. What else? $5 million signing bonus. 10% equity in any product commercialization. Miranda didn't even blink. Done. When can you start? 2 weeks. We shook hands. The next Monday, I submitted my resignation to St. Jude Medical Center. Preston Sterling called me into his office. Dr. Vance, I received your resignation. May I ask why? Better opportunity. I see. Well, we'll be sorry to lose you. Obviously, all your research materials and patents remain property of the hospital. I smiled. Actually, no, they don't. Excuse me? Section 4.2 of my employment contract. Maintenance clause. You cut my budget below the threshold. Patent rights reverted to me 31 days ago. Sterling's face went white. What are you talking about? I slid a letter across his desk. From my lawyer. The Neuralink is mine. I'm taking it with me. Have a nice day, Preston. I walked out. Sterling was screaming something behind me, but I didn't stop. I spent the next week cleaning out my lab. I took my notebooks, my prototype units, my patient data, properly anonymized and legally mine. The lab I left behind was empty. Just machines and equipment the hospital had paid for. But the innovation, the actual value, walked out with me. I started at Apex Biotech 2 weeks later. They gave me everything I asked for. State-of-the-art neural engineering lab. Team of 12 researchers. Unlimited budget for FDA trials. I was home. For 3 months, I worked in peace. The Neuralink progressed beautifully. We completed the final trials. FDA approval pathway looked clear. And then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Dr. Vance? This is Gerald Whitmore, CEO of St. Jude Medical Center. I'd never spoken to the CEO directly. He was several levels above Sterling. Mr. Whitmore, what can I do for you? I need to speak with you urgently. About the Neuralink technology. I don't work there anymore. I'm aware. But we have a situation. Can we meet? Why? His voice sounded strained. Because we're about to lose a $500 million investment deal because of that technology. Now I was interested. I'll meet you. Tomorrow. My lawyer will be present. The meeting was at a neutral location. Conference room in a downtown law office. Whitmore arrived with 3 lawyers and Preston Sterling. Sterling looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 months. My lawyer Jessica and I sat across from them. Whitmore began, Dr. Vance, thank you for meeting. I'll be direct. 3 months ago, we entered negotiations with Vanguard Medical Investments for a major partnership. $500 million over 5 years. Congratulations. The deal was structured around the Neuralink technology. It was the centerpiece. The reason they wanted to invest. I said nothing. Yesterday, they asked to see our progress on the FDA trials. We realized the lab is empty. The technology is gone. Because I took it when I left. Sterling interrupted. You stole proprietary hospital technology. Jessica jumped in. Dr. Vance owned that technology free and clear. Section 4.2 of his employment contract, which your office violated when you cut his budget below the maintenance threshold. One of their lawyers confirmed. She's right. We reviewed the contract. The clause is valid. Sterling slumped in his chair. Whitmore continued. Dr. Vance, we need that technology. The investors are threatening to pull out entirely if we can't deliver. That's unfortunate. We're prepared to offer you. We can negotiate a licensing agreement. Revenue sharing. Whatever you need. I don't need anything from you. I have everything I need at Apex. Please, name your price. I leaned forward. Mr. Whitmore, let me tell you what happened. I spent 8 years developing breakthrough technology. I asked for $150,000 to finish the work. Preston here denied my request, cited austerity. The next day, I discovered that austerity meant cutting medical research to pay for an executive golf retreat at Pebble Beach. Same amount, $147,000. Whitmore looked at Sterling. Is that true? Sterling didn't answer. So you chose golf over patience, over innovation, over $500 million in investment. I stood up. You didn't just lose an employee, Mr. Whitmore. You lost the blueprint, and there's no price that brings it back. Jessica and I walked out. Behind us, I heard Whitmore's voice, quiet but furious. Preston, you're fired. Security will escort you out today. I didn't look back. The fallout was spectacular. Vanguard Medical Investments pulled their entire deal. St. Jude lost not just the $500 million, but their reputation with investors. The hospital's board launched an investigation into Sterling's management. They found he'd cut research budgets across multiple departments while approving lavish executive expenses. Sterling was fired and faced a lawsuit from the hospital for gross mismanagement. Last I heard, he's unemployed and untouchable in healthcare administration. Meanwhile, Apex Biotech and I completed the Neuralink FDA trials. We received approval 8 months after I left St. Jude. The device launched commercially a year later. First year sales, $300 million. My 10% equity stake was worth $30 million in year one alone. But more importantly, we've helped over 2,000 stroke patients regain mobility. People who couldn't move their arms can now hold their children. People who couldn't walk can now stand at their daughter's wedding. That's worth more than any dollar amount. Today, I'm Chief Innovation Officer at Apex Biotech. I run a division of 80 researchers. We're working on next-generation neural technology that makes the Neuralink look primitive. And I make sure every single researcher on my team has the budget they need. Always. Because I learned something from Preston Sterling. He thought budget cuts were just numbers on a spreadsheet. He didn't realize those numbers represented loyalty, innovation, and legal ownership. He traded a diamond mine for a weekend on the putting green because he couldn't tell the difference between cost and value. Small thinkers can't manage big ideas. They see expense where they should see investment. They see cost where they should see potential. And when you undervalue the talent that builds your foundation, you don't just lose an employee. You lose everything they were creating. Sterling saved $150,000. It cost him $500 million. That's the worst trade in hospital history. But for me, it was liberation. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being undervalued by people too small to recognize your worth. Because it forces you to go somewhere you'll be valued correctly. I didn't fight St. Jude in court. I didn't burn bridges publicly. I didn't need to. I just quietly picked up my innovation and walked out the door. And when they realized what they'd lost, I was already building something bigger somewhere else. That's the lesson. Never let small thinkers manage big ideas. And never, ever stay where your brilliance is treated as a budget line item to be trimmed. Because somewhere out, there is an organization that will give you everything you need. You just have to be brave enough to walk away from the one that doesn't. I walked away, and I never looked back.